Children will learn what they need to in their own time, on their own accord, if we just give them the chance. And when I say a chance, I mean a real chance. The chance to learn in a rich environment, the chance to have freedom, and the chance to be surrounded by supportive adults who are there not to direct learning, but to facilitate it. So let's unpack this a little bit more. In my previous video, I mentioned how the way that we are approaching education at the moment really needs to change. And the solution that I offered is that we need to start to rewild learning. If you're curious to check out more what that entails, then I will put a link to that video in this video somewhere so you can go check that out. But to be brief, rewilding learning really just means going back to the way that children have learned for tens of thousands of years before schools ever emerged. And the way that children learned was through free play and exploration. So how are we going to rewild learning in schools? I have a few ideas, so let's delve into them together. Number one, we really need to change up the environment that children learn in. We need to create a more rich environment. What constitutes a rich environment? Well, I think for starters, kids need to be out here in the natural world more. They need to be learning through their senses, and what better way to get your senses engaged than in the outdoors? And I have a few ideas of how we could make our schoolyards more interesting as well. I think that we need to rewild our schoolyards. Rather than just have a plain old field, I think that we could start to plant native species like trees and shrubs and flowers, and almost make like a little woodland area in the schoolyard for kids to explore and play in. And I think that this would actually be a lot safer than just letting our kids run loose on the playground, which is made out of metal. And I'm not saying that we need to get rid of playgrounds altogether. I think they're fun and beneficial in their own way. However, I do think that playing outside on fallen logs and branches and picking up sticks and twigs to play with is actually a lot more safer than our metal playgrounds. Within the span of 2 weeks when I was a teacher, there were 2 playground accidents that involved an ambulance having to come, and they were pretty serious accidents. I've never seen that happen in my time as a forest school facilitator with kids just playing outside. So there you have it. There's one idea for a way to rewild and enrich our learning environment outdoors in our schoolyards. Now, thinking about our indoor environment, I do think that there is a lot of work to be done here. Classrooms are very box-like, and kids are spending most of their day just basically sitting in a giant box. Now, this is actually one I don't have a lot of ideas for, so I would be really interested in hearing from you how you think that we could rewild our indoor school environments. So please leave a comment below letting me know how you think that we could make our indoor environments more interesting. One idea that I have is making our hallways more interesting. So, for example, rather than just being expected to walk in a straight line to your classroom and be quiet the whole time that you're walking, which is silly because adults talk in the hallways all the time. What if we made our hallways into kind of like a jungle gym where kids could literally like monkey bar from one classroom to the other, for example? I know that sounds maybe a bit chaotic, but I think there would be a way to implement this where kids are aware of some guidelines as they're moving from space to space. It's okay if you think it's maybe too crazy, but I think it would be a lot of fun. Also, schools are fairly dimly lit, and I think that this needs to change. We at least need to implement like a law or something that says that classrooms have to have windows, because I have taught in classrooms that have 0 windows. In fact, my first classroom as a first-year teacher had no windows, and it really took a toll on me. So if it took a toll on me, I can only imagine how it impacts the ability of a child to learn. On the topic of dimly lit environments in our schools, I do think that we need to allow kids to be outdoors more so that they have the access to the natural light that they need. When we consider that we are animals and that we need natural light to be our best and feel our best, it's actually kind of crazy to think that we spend most of our days cooped up in an indoor environment. It's sort of like we're living in a zoo enclosure, except for zoo enclosures in a zoo have more natural elements than ours do. So it really is kind of crazy that we are forcing kids to be indoors all day without access to natural light, fresh air, and just the natural, beautiful elements around us. Number 2, we need to allow children to freely explore their environment. This would require loosening up our schedules a lot. Currently, right now, our schedules in schools are very rigid and very structured. But in order for kids to really be able to learn through their play and exploration, they need so much time, so much more time than what we're currently giving them. Kids on average take about 30 minutes to delve into their play, and the fact that we're only giving 20 minutes roughly for recess is crazy because kids can't even really fully reap the benefits of their play while they're at school. So yes, we need to loosen up our schedules a lot, let kids freely explore and have the time and space to do so. Now, I do understand that some kids do better with structure and schedules. I get that. But don't we cater to individual needs as much as possible in public schools? If so, then why would it be any different in a child-led learning school? For the kids that need more structure, we could support them in creating more structure for them. Rather than expecting all kids everywhere to follow a very rigid schedule, I do think we can individualize it a bit more. Going along with this, I think that kids need to be able to choose whether they want to be outdoors or indoors for most of the day. And this would require more adult supervision outdoors throughout the day, but I don't think that would be a bad thing for us adults. I think we could also benefit from being outside in the fresh air more as well. Going back to the wisdom of our ancestors, especially our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they did not view children as beings who needed to be controlled and told what to do for every minute of the day. They saw children as sovereign beings capable of making their own choices and their own decisions. It might seem scary as the adult to hand over the autonomy to the child, but I really do believe that we would see so much more learning, so much more true, authentic, intrinsic learning happening as a result of allowing the child to make their own choices. And it's okay to intervene sometimes when it's really necessary. When a child is very unsafe, for example, we adults can still be there to say, that crosses a line, you're not allowed to do that. But I do think that we can step back a lot more than we're currently doing. And this leads into reason number 3, which is that learning should be child-led but adult-facilitated. We have had schools for hundreds of years now, although schools haven't really been publicly available and widespread like they are now until the early 1900s. And so anyone living in modern society who has grown up with schools has it pretty much ingrained in them that they are necessary for children. I think we really have been conditioned to think that schools are necessary, otherwise kids are going to grow up to be incapable or something. I actually would argue that more learning happens when we step out of the way. When we give time to children to freely explore their own ideas and questions about the world, I actually think it's magical. They feel so much more inquisitive and excited about what they're learning as opposed to being told, this is important and you need to know it. And as the adult, we can expand learning by asking really open-ended questions. This is my favorite way to spark inquiry. So for example, when I am outside with my forest school groups and a child hears the sound of a squirrel, but they've never heard a squirrel before and they don't know what it is, rather than just squash the inquiry and squash their inquisitiveness by just saying, oh yeah, it's a squirrel. Instead, what I like to do is ask questions. I will ask, what do you think that was? Can you see it? Where do you think it's coming from? Should we get closer? What color is it? What does it look like? And so on and so forth. I mean, you can keep thinking of questions. This allows the child to discover for themselves what a squirrel is in their own time, when they're ready for it. They're not going to live their whole lives not knowing that it's a squirrel. Eventually, they're going to connect the dots. When they see the animal, they're going to say, oh, that's not a bird, or that's not what I thought it was. It's something else. What is it? And the inquiry can be taken even further there. Some might say, well, Carolyn, this is all well and good, but like children need to learn how to read and write and stuff. Okay, yes, they do, because we live in a literate society, but that's exactly the point. They live in a literate environment, and therefore they are going to learn how to read in their own time. So yes, in schools, we do need to enrich the literate environment that they live in. We need to offer them lots of different books on lots of different topics. We also can provide them with lots of activities that they don't necessarily have to do, but can choose to engage in that have to do with developing literacy skills. And I have heard lots of anecdotal evidence of this happening, where kids are allowed to learn how to read when they're ready. And even though they may learn later on than what is expected in schools, oftentimes they will learn very, very quickly. So they will go from just barely learning how to read to reading Harry Potter novels within a few months. So this would mean no curriculum. That sounds scary to some, but think about it. Does it make sense for every child to learn the exact same body of knowledge, even though they are different people with different interests and different strengths and weaknesses? Does it make sense? I personally don't think so. I think we would see a lot happier children if they were allowed to basically come up with their own curriculum based off of their own interests and likes. Number 4, we need to allow age mixing in our schools. And I don't mean a split level to grade 2-3 class. No, I mean all children all together, young and old, old. I mean, grade 12 students with grade 1 students. We don't even have to label it grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. If play is the primary way that children learn, then there is so much to be gained by interacting with kids of different ages. It just doesn't make sense to only be exposed to kids your own age. And some teachers make an effort by combining classes for certain activities, but I really mean throughout the whole day, age mixing is allowed. Our ancestors would have never segregated children by age. That just would have been silly. In fact, they didn't even really keep track of their age a lot of the time. But nowadays, it's like we're obsessed with measuring everything. You have 20 minutes for lunch. You have 15 minutes to finish reading your story. And also, you are 9 years old, so you are only going to learn with the other 9-year-olds in this building. The reality is that there are lots of benefits to allowing age mixing. So one example is that younger kids will learn from the older children because the older children have more experience, they've learned for longer periods of time, and therefore they have more knowledge about the world. And they can impart that knowledge to their younger friends. The older children benefit from this interaction as well because they learn how to be nurturing and caring. Now, some might think that these changes are too radical. How could we go from the way that things currently are, which is a very structured system where adults are the ones in charge telling the kids what they need to learn, to essentially allowing kids to freely explore their environment and decide what they want to do all day? That sounds like craziness to some people. That sounds chaotic to some people. I get it. It sounds really radical, doesn't it? But you know what else sounded really radical at the time? That women should be allowed to vote. But eventually we decided that they deserved that right, and it's commonplace now. And I would even go so far as to say that this is a children's rights issue. The fact that we are not allowing them to go outside for very long during the day, I think it's a children's rights issue. Children deserve to be able to move more freely throughout the day. What I've said today in this video might seem unrealistic to some people. I personally think it's important to dream big and to take small and simple steps in the direction of our bigger goals. What is really encouraging is that there are schools out there who are implementing everything that I talked about in this video. The best example that I can think of is the Sudbury Valley School, which is in Massachusetts. They are a school that is implementing everything that I talked about in today's video. They are essentially rewilding learning. I would highly recommend checking out their website to learn more about them. I have their website linked down below for you. I'm not going to be going into greater detail about their school, so that's why I have provided that link. But I did just want to provide an example for you so that you can see that these things are not outlandish, that they are possible. It's easy to get overwhelmed and think that we need to do things on a grand scale, but I do think that we need to start at the local level. What can I do in my specific town or community or province today? Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If any of this resonates with you, then I would really appreciate your support. The best way that you can support me is by liking this video, commenting, and letting me know how you think we can rewild our indoor environments. I have so much more content coming, so much more ideas to share with you. So please do subscribe, like, comment, all of that jazz. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.